Hi, this is Ariane of Sociable Art, and today we're going to paint this trio of pumpkins. I'm painting mine on a pre-sketched 11 by 14 canvas that I sketched myself, and I just showed you what the finished product should look like. If you'd like, you can order a printed grayscale version like this. This is a canvas sheet. It's there's two different sizes available, either 9 by 12 or 11 by 14. It comes with paints and brushes, and you can order that at sociableart.com. And there are a variety of paint kits on there that you can choose from. And that way you can paint along with the video with a printed canvas, which makes it a lot easier. Or you can sketch out your own at home on a blank canvas. These are the paints we're using today. You can use any acrylics. I'm using basic colors. I'm just going to mix them together to get some other shades. So I have titanium white, a cobalt green, light yellow, cobalt blue, a dark brown or raw umber, and red. And of course I'll have to mix the red and the yellow together to get the orange that I need. And I'll also be mixing some of the other colors together to get other shades. Can be fun to do that. You'll need two brushes only for this, medium size, like a number 4 brush, or any kind, a filbert, an angled, anything will do, and then a smaller, maybe a number 1 round brush for doing the little stems and signing your name, things like that. So remember to use the biggest brush you can for any area, and then you'll get like less brush strokes. And even if you want to use an even bigger brush to get the background area, that would be good too. But the kits come with just 2 brushes, so we're going to use 2 brushes today. And you always want to start with the things that are in the background of the painting, and then move forward to each thing that is in front of that background until you get to the things that are in the foreground. So that's the rule. And so the thing that's farthest in the background is this wall here, the background. And I'm showing you where the darkest areas are. And you can do this background any color you want that will match your decor. You don't have to do it the color I did. But in my original, I have dark brown in the background, and then I have one light area up in the upper right-hand corner. And you can add other shades into your brown as you go, and I'm going to do that. You could add orange, yellow, if you want to make warm colors, or you can add blue as I'm doing today to give it a kind of cooler background. But right now I'm starting with the brown, and I'm doing the darkest area, and I paint the sides of my canvas too. Of course, that's not an issue with the canvas sheet, but with this canvas I have sides and I'm painting those. So I started on the side of the pumpkin and I outlined, and I do these back and forth strokes. You can either do long sweeping strokes in one direction, or you can use these little choppy back and forth strokes, which I use because I like to add different paint colors into the brown, and then it blends them in on the canvas, like with that back and forth motion. So I started by outlining along the side of the pumpkin, and then I filled in the background around there. You don't want to go around and outline the entire pumpkin at one time and then try to fill in the background, because the acrylic paint dries very quickly, and that outline will dry before you finish adding the background next to it, and you'll be able to see it when the painting's done even. I don't know why that happens, but it does. So you want to just work a section at a time. And you can see up in that area right there, I just added a little yellow into the paint. I just added it right in without cleaning the brush, just dipped that same brush into the yellow and put it on the canvas and blended it in. So that would make a nice warm background. But as I said, I think on this one I'm going to do a cool background just for fun. So I'm going to add blue eventually to mine, but I haven't done that as yet. Now when it comes to the sketch of the stem, or if you're using a printed sheet, the printed stem, you can either go around the big part of the stem with your paint, leaving it there for you to paint later, or you can paint right over it and just add it back. It's easier sometimes to just paint over the little details like that. I'm definitely going to paint over the little curly Q skinny part at the end of the stem, because that's just way too hard to go around and you'll have too many brush strokes showing around that. So I'm showing you here that I added a little bit of blue into that section. Just dipped into the blue paint and added that, and it kind of makes this cool steel brown grayish color. And so I'm going to keep adding that, and then when I get up to the corner where the light is coming from over in the right I will add some white and blue to the brown, and I'll get a really interesting shade there. We use a student grade acrylic, which means that it doesn't have as much pigment and it's not as heavy bodied, because student grade paints are quite affordable. And when you're just learning how to paint, you don't want to spend a lot of money on expensive paints, because we consider these paintings kind of like studies. They're your practices. And once you get, you feel more confident with your skill level, then you can switch to the more expensive paints. But the downside to using this student grade paint is that you will be able to see some brush strokes, which I don't mind at all. I kind of like seeing the brush strokes in the finished painting. If you want it to appear more smooth or a deeper color, you might have to apply another coat of paint, another layer of paint to get that more finished look. So feel free to do that, and I'm going to do that with this painting. You'll see the result. As for now, I'm still just filling in that background, and even though I'm using these back and forth strokes, I am there's still like a direction that I'm going. The brush strokes are not going every which way. They're kind of going left to right still. There's a motion in the background. So I wanted to mention that. And here I'm adding some blue again. I've added brown right up close to the pumpkins, but here starting to add blue into the brown. So there's a blue and brown mixed together here. I'm just going to do some longer sweeping motions here as we're going towards that light in the corner. Longer sweeping ones here. And then I added the white up in the corner up there. And I still had the other colors in my brush, so it doesn't come out as a straight white. And then I blended into the area right next to that white area. I don't want to carry it all the way down towards the pumpkins. Just combine that area. You can see up close it's still a little bit rough, because I do plan to add a second coat or a second layer. But if you feel like it looks fine like that, which I do, you can just leave it like that and call it done and not spend the extra time. Now I'm adding some white onto the tabletop. I'm not going to leave it so white, but right now I'm just adding that wet white paint right there down, and then because that's my lightest area of the tabletop. But I want you to know that you can use any of the, I don't know if there's 5 or 6 colors in the palette, you can use any of those colors on the tabletop in any combination. I do like it to stay kind of lighter than the background though. So, it's up to you if you want to make it slightly orangish in shade. I'm adding a little bit of brown and a little bit of yellow here, and I'm going to sweep that into the white. I'm going to blend it on the canvas into the white. This is the light area of the table, and it's really up to you what shade you make it. So I'm just drawing that color up into the white. I don't really want the white to end up being a straight white up there. And maybe on the second layer I'll kind of change that even more. When we get down here towards the bottom of the pumpkins, we have to add a shadow, because these pumpkins would cast a shadow on the table. And you can either do the simple thing, which is just add like a dark brown shadow where they sit on the table, and then blend that into your tabletop. Or you can get kind of more advanced and add like the opposite color. So like this pumpkin is green. So the opposite color of that green on the color wheel would be red. And I can add that into the brown for my shadow, or just add like red and green together, and that makes a shade of brown, and put that on there as my shadow. And then for the yellow pumpkin, so on the yellow pumpkin I would have a purple shadow, which you can get by mixing red and blue. And on the orange pumpkin I would have a blue shadow, or blue mixed with the orange. But you don't have to do that. I mean, they all come out to kind of a shade of brown. It's just a slightly different shade of brown. On this one I just added brown, and then I added some of that blue like I did in the background. So it's blue and brown, And I don't want to, take it out too far from under my pumpkin. I don't want to spread that darkness too far. I want it to remain a shadow that it's casting to the left and under. So I don't want to fill this whole light area with that dark shade. I want it to get out of control. And then I'll go ahead and also add that dark shade under here, and I'll add some blue to it on this one too. But remember, you can add blue to orange to get a different shade of brown, or you could add purple under here. It's really up to you. There's so many things we can do, and that's what I want is for you to feel, by doing these practice paintings, to get your confidence in order to kind of experiment and see what your style is and see how you want to paint this. It doesn't even have to be realistic colors if you don't want it to be. And you can make it much more loose and much more abstract. You don't have to get all detailed. Some people really like having a very detailed, realistic painting, but you could make yours a lot looser with the brush strokes, and that would be completely fine. So here I'm putting some white into the corner, because do remember that if you want to mix two shades, so I want to end up mixing this color on the tabletop, which is, like a cream color, and I want to mix that with the shadow under the pumpkin. If I want to do that, I want both those areas to still have wet paint. If it's not wet, if one of them has dried, it's very hard to blend those colors. So I would suggest if one of the areas has dried, that you go back and get it wet again with the original color. So when I do the blending, I'm only blending right on the area where the two colors collide, two shades, because I don't want to have that brown drawn out all into the table. So I'm just blending a little more there. And as I said, I do plan to put a second coat. Here I tried a little something. I tried to see if I liked having a little bit of green added to that area. And I'm not even sure that I do. I might cover that over later when I do the second layer. But for now, I'm just going to leave that. And you can go ahead and work on your second layer now in the background. I think I'll go ahead and put a first coat on the stems. Only the two stems that are sticking up into the background. I don't want to mess with the other one yet, because that's on top of the other pumpkin. But if you want to skip doing a first coat on the stems and just do a second layer on your background, you can do that. But I just thought a first little coat, which it doesn't matter if you get the background color on it and everything, but my first pumpkin is going to have still kind of a green stem, like it's fresh. So it's going to have green with a little bit of brown mixed in it and maybe a little white. And I'm not, I'm just going to fill in the part of the stem that you see showing. I don't want to get into all the skinny little curly Q ends at this point. Just want to do a first coat. And then I'll also do one on the one next to it, but that will be just a slightly different shade. It won't be the same green brown. I think I'll just do brown mixed with a little bit of white. So I'm just mixing my color, and here I go. I'm going to put it in here with the medium brush. If you find it difficult to use the medium brush to do this, you can always use the smaller brush. And as I fill it in, I'm kind of adding just some different shades in there, maybe some little lines, because I want this to look like it's a twisted stem. It's not just one solid color. But you don't have to make this difficult. If you want to just fill it in one solid color, it will look perfectly fine that way. I'm just giving you some options of, how realistic do you want it to look? Or do you just, want it to be a decorative item that you don't want to stress over? So that's up to you and your skill level. So it's green, white with a little bit of brown, and I had a little bit of white lines in it. And then the other stem will be more white with a little bit of brown, maybe a little bit of yellow. I'm just going to deepen the color here using the dark brown. Okay, so I'm not going to work on those pumpkins yet. I still need to work on the background and the foreground by doing another layer of color to get some deeper, darker areas and more vibrant colors. So I'm adding that dark brown here first, and then I'll start adding some blue into it. But you can see how much deeper I'm going to get of color, the more contrast, so that it'll be a little more dramatic looking. But as I said, if you like it the way it is, please feel free to leave it just that way. It doesn't have to have these deeper shades. And I'm just going to continue filling in that background. And I'll probably do a little time lapse where I'm going to speed up the video because I don't want to bore you with watching me do the same exact thing that I did in the first steps over again. So you can pause it while you do your second layer, and then restart it when we're ready to paint in the pumpkins. Okay, as you can see, I've added a second layer to the background and the foreground, so they're a lot deeper in color. I don't think you can quite see all the color variation in there, but see, there was a little glare, so you couldn't quite see. It looked darker than it was, but there's a lot more blue in the brown than you probably can see. Okay, so now we have to work on the pumpkins, and we start with the one in the back, which will be an orange pumpkin. And I like to, have several different shades to make it look three-dimensional. And it's really going to stand out against that really dark background. So I mixed the red with the yellow. It's more yellow than the red. You're going to use like 2 parts of yellow to 1 little part of red. And I'm going to start on the darkest side. This is the one farthest from the light. And I'm going to start with my darkest shade of orange over here. And I'm trying to do my brush strokes so they go in the direction of the segments of the pumpkin, because that will help the direction of my brush strokes will help give shape to the pumpkin. Okay, So down here I've added some brown to my orange, or if you want to get a little tricky, you can add some blue to your orange to create the shadow. And I take it back, I think I might have actually done that. So blue added to the orange, and I'm going to have that darker shadowed area there. And I ran that up that little line where the segment is. And then I'll go back to my orange and put that next to the darker area, and I'll blend them in a moment. But here I'm adding some more of the shadowed area on the bottom of the pumpkin where the light would not reach it. And I'm doing my brush strokes up into the segment of the pumpkin. And I don't do it at this time, but I am going to do it later. There would also be probably a shadow cast from the second pumpkin onto this pumpkin. But I'll have to just add that later. So here I'm adding the orange shade right next to and blending into the shadow. And if you get too much of the darker color on your, you see that I'm not rinsing my brush a lot with this painting. If you get though, if you're somebody who uses a lot of paint, you get too much of like that bluish brown shade in your brush and you don't want to pull it all through the pumpkin, just use your paper towel to wipe off the excess. That's what I do a lot of the time. So right now I'm just adding orange again and blending it down into that blue area, the blue-brown shadow area. Now as I move across the pumpkin from segment to segment, I want to lighten my orange because there's going to be more light on it. Here I'm just adding a little bit of darker shade along the segment because that would be down into a shadow a little bit. So my next segment, it's the same color orange, but I might add just a little bit of yellow and maybe a little bit of white to it because it's going to get lighter because it's going to be closer to the light source. Making sure to do my brush strokes to go along with the segments. I'm going to go around that stem, but I am going to cover some of it. I don't want to worry about the little skinny part. It's too hard to paint around it and keep those brush strokes going vertically like that. Now I just dipped right into the white paint, and I can just add that right into that wet orange paint to get sort of a highlighted area, and it really helps to make it, you know, look more three-dimensional. So I still have that lighter shade on my brush. I'm going to use it to start the next segment. And I added a little yellow in there too, make it a little more bright. I like that yellow mixed with the orange. I think that looks really nice. And I do need to add some white onto this segment too to have a highlight. There we go, there's that white. You can blend that as much or as little as you want. It's okay to leave it just not very blended and just some brush strokes. And if you want to do a second coat on this or a second layer on the pumpkin, you can make it even more subtle, the variations in shades. And especially that area where the shadows goes into the orange, a second layer would help to make it look a little smoother. I'm just adding a little more dark orange on here and blending it in. Because I felt like there was a little bit too much in the brush strokes showing. Doing longer sweeping strokes from the bottom to the top here. And if you ever, like if you do rinse your brush and then you have it like slightly damp and you go to put it onto the canvas, if it's too damp, it'll sometimes pull off the paint that you already have on there and you'll have a wet spot in your canvas where there is no paint. You just have to let that dry or dab it with a paper towel, and then when it's dry you can reapply paint to that bare area. Okay, I'm moving on now to the green pumpkin, and I created a shade of green which is green and yellow with a little bit of brown. Okay, more brown on this far side of the pumpkin, and then we'll have less when we go over towards the side that's in the light. So this is green, yellow, and brown on the darkest side of the pumpkin. Doing those long brush strokes. And of course down here we're going to need to have some shadowing, so we'll add either some red into our color to make a shadow, or just add dark brown is the easiest way to get a shadowed area on the bottom of the pumpkin. Or you can do red mixed with green to create another shade of brown. So adding that shadow here and blending it into the wet paint. You see I like work segment by segment, because if I just did the lighter green and then tried to add the shadow to it, part of it would probably already be dry. So that's why I do it segment by segment. And you don't want to blend it up too far into your pumpkin, or the whole segment will be the same color. That's really not what we're going for. We want a dark area on the bottom and then the lighter area on the top. And just pulling that dark shade up from the bottom. And I got to work quickly enough that it won't dry, creating some more of the lighter shade. And once we move towards the lighted side of the pumpkin, we'll add white to our green as well. See how I'm maintaining the shape of the segments. Fill it in with this one color first, and then I'm going to lighten it up with the white. It's just easier to add it into the wet paint. I wiped some of it off on my paper towel, wiped the paint off on my paper towel, not in the water, and then I just added white right into the paint. Need a little bit more on each of these tops of each of these segments where the light's hitting them. More white, and I definitely need to deepen my shadows on the bottom too, and I can either do that now or I can wait till it dries and go back and do a second layer to get those dark areas really dark. So here I'm using the red and the green mixed together, that shade of brown. It's a nice color to have on there on the bottom. Just don't want to use too much of it and have it just take over the whole pumpkin. So don't overload your brush with this dark pink color. I do like that contrast. And remember, if your dark brown gets out of hand and your pumpkin's getting too dark, you can always switch back to the original shade, the green shade, and just go start from there. Work down from the top back into the brown. So notice I pull that dark color up from the bottom, and then I do pull it up into the lines that represent the segments of the pumpkins. And then the last pumpkin, I'm going to do yellow with white added to it and some brown. White, yellow, and brown. Very little of the brown. It's mostly white and yellow. This pumpkin's so small, I can almost paint all the light area before adding shadows and it won't dry. So I've got the lighter area over here with a lot of white added to the yellow. And then on the left side of the pumpkin, we'll have more brown added to the yellow shade. And I'm working in each section, doing the brush strokes down towards the bottom. Boy, that was fast and easy. I wish they all were that easy. And then the shadow on this one, you can either create a purple, which would be red and blue mixed together, mix that with the yellow for your shadow, or you can just do dark brown. That's up to you. Looks like I tried a little blue and brown. Blue and brown, and I'm just pulling it up from the bottom. Remember, if it gets out of hand, you can just wipe the paint off of your brush and go back to your yellow and just cover that area with the yellow again, so it'll be more subtle. I'm working up from the bottom using that same loaded brush, so I have less of the dark color on there now on purpose so that it won't be quite as dark and dramatic. And I'm just trying to blend this in a little bit more. And got that line and that one added in a little bit more, and this one too, using the edge of my brush. You can add some other colors in this pumpkin too if you wanted there to be some green or some orange added. That would be cool too. The stem on this one, you probably want to have it darker, like have more just dark brown with a little bit of white or yellow added to it, because it's got to stand out against the pumpkin behind it. Wouldn't spend a lot of time on this yet because we still might add more to that orange pumpkin, and we'll just have to do parts of the stem again. And I'm definitely not doing that curling part yet, just this part. And you can add a second or third even layer of color to any of these areas that you want to get them more dramatic, and to have them just showing a little more contrast. I'm just doing a time lapse here because I just wanted to add some more highlights and to darken the dark areas. Didn't want to bore you with going through the whole thing, have it take too much time, because yours probably doesn't even need to have this much detail, but I thought it'd be nice just to add some more highlights, more dark areas, and another layer of paint. And so here's where we're at now. Now we need to add to our stems and add those little curling details at the end. So I do this with white just because it shows up best against the background. So that's just straight white, and I'm using my small little round brush, number 1. There we go, little lines. And hey, if you do something that you don't like, that gets out of control, and you don't like the way that looks, you could always add brown back into your background. Here I'm adding a white highlight on the side of the stem where the light would hit it, and also some lines, because usually the stems have some lines, some grooves in them. So I'm adding that in there as well. And then on this stem there's this little part that comes off of the side. So I'm just adding that with the white paint. And then the one on the bottom, we have brown, so we're going to do brown on that. We can do white lines on it, but the actual little curling stem will be brown. So there's the little curl. You can do as much or as little to this painting as you want. You can go back. I eventually will go back and add maybe even some more shades onto the pumpkins. Like the one pumpkin is just straight green. I might add some other shades, a little bit of orange in it or something like that. You can do a little bit more to the background, add a little more motion in the background, and I'll show at the end you'll see my finished painting that has just a little bit more going on in the background, a little more action. If you enjoyed painting this and you want to see more of the videos, please like and subscribe so you can see when I release new ones. And also you can order paint kits with the printed canvases for all of them. And it's something to do fun for a date night or with your kids or something like that. And we do have these available for teams and groups as well. So we'd ship them to your whole remote team so you could paint together. I'm just darkening right here the stem right at the base because I want it to be separate looking from the pumpkin itself. So if I add that really dark shade right next to where it comes out of the pumpkin, it looks more three-dimensional. So I think that's a good thing. So I'm just going to keep doing that, and like I said, you can stay tuned to the end. I'll show the finished painting, but I really appreciate you painting with me, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.